Okay, so today is February the 11th, the 11th of February 2022, and we'll talk about two architects and also tentative sketch about Descartes, Eisenstein, and architecture. That's because today, meaning on February 11th, both Descartes and the great Russian film director Sergei Eisenstein died. And the relationship with architecture is and could be and should be analyzed properly, more than I'm able to do today, but at least I am thinking about it. Okay, let's begin with Arne Jacobsen, a very important Danish architect. This is what he said: if a building becomes architecture, then it is art. Well, you know, so it has to become architecture in order to be art. But what he says also is that architecture is art. And this is the statement of a functionalist architect. If there ever was one, he is one, but he's an architect. He's not, I mean, he is a builder, but he's also an architect. And being an architect, then he's also, as a corollary, an artist. I don't know if he said this, but every time I searched for images about him, I came across this, funny saying: "Design is fine, history is mine." I don't know. So Arne Emil Jacobsen, no, he actually was born, sorry, on the 11th of February. I'm so confused about, because I pay homage to both people born on a certain day and who died on a certain day, that sometimes I get confused. So he was born on the 11th of February, and I apologize for saying initially that he died on the February on the 11th of February. But maybe Heraclitus was right. The great pre-Socratic philosopher thought that what we call life is actually death, and that what we call death is actually life. So who knows? Maybe when we are born, we die, and when we die, we are actually born. Who knows? Okay, was a well-known Danish architect and furniture designer. He's remembered for his contribution to architectural functionalism and for the worldwide success he enjoyed with simple but effective chair designs. Here he is sitting, rather comfortably in a typical Arne Jacobsen chair, probably quite comfortable. He seems to have new shoes, or almost new. Here he is smoking. Not too many architects smoke any longer, but at that time, they kept smoking. The bow tie is there for all to see. Architects love bow ties, sometimes at least. Here he is again with his pipe, Arne Jacobsen, and here he is meditative. Again, I can't avoid to look at his shoes. Somehow his shoes seem to be almost new, if not new. Anyway, an interesting man and an interesting designer and an interesting, a very good architect. Here he is in a, doctored photograph in a way. You see him, twice in different positions with his chair. I forgot how this chair was called, but this is a typical, no, I shouldn't say typical, because he designed all kinds of chairs. Some drawings of Arne Jacobsen. Now, Bjarke Ingels is also a Danish. And Bjarke Ingels said, I want to make a building as important, as significant as the opera in Sydney, which was also designed by a Dane, by John Utzon. He would not have said, I want to design a building like Arne Jacobsen designed. Although Arne Jacobsen, in his more reticent way, was an equally important architect. This is a drawing for a gas station. We are going to see the building as well, for a cinema, for a hotel which was built, and sorry about the resolution here, glassware. He designed everything. Handmade drawings, of course, with pencil, a staircase, the building of the future, maybe. Here it is, the plan. So again, we are dealing with the architect as a dreamer. Even if he was a functionalist, he didn't stop dreaming. And what we look at here is, in a way, a dream. Another dream. Another dream. This one, I don't know if it is a dream, but this probably was to be a good building. Now we start with this from 1932, Bellevue Beach. It's I don't know very well how to describe it. He designed this thing here, you know, and it's an early work, but it is a little bit whimsical somehow. Talking about the Danes, about Denmark, on my website, Icarch, I used at the about section of the website a fragment from a film by Jean-Luc Godard, where he tells a group of students that on the countryside of Denmark, two great physicists were walking, and they came across the castle where Hamlet lived. And, you know, the visitor said to the other one, well, it's not so special, this castle. And the other one said, yes, but when you know that Hamlet lived there, it becomes immediately significant and important. So even if a building is not maybe great, a great biography, even if it is a fictional biography, like the character of a play, for example, it becomes important. So maybe in a way, Bernard Tschumi was right that in order to appreciate architecture and to have good architecture, you might even have to commit a crime, in the sense that you have to have an event. If an event happens in a certain building, even if the building is not great, it becomes somehow colored, so to speak, by being special. And that's why I think it's important to have narration in architecture, to have a narrative architecture, an architecture which communicates something beyond you know, its concern with the space, walls, materials, and so on. Now, this is a residential complex in Copenhagen, in that region of Copenhagen, Klampenborg, from 1931, 1934. This early modernism has an authenticity which, in my opinion, 100 years later is difficult to achieve, because you cannot really repeat the same kind of architecture 100 years later. We have to invent new things that belong to our time, and there are people who recycle, you know, modernism. Sorry, I don't know what I did here. Yeah, but it's still again, if this kind of buildings were built today, they would be published on all the blogs and websites and e-signs and so on. Look at the car. Yes, it's a beautiful car, but the car belongs to that time, 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago, while the buildings if you build these buildings exactly as they are today, you know, people will say this is good architecture for our time. But look at the car again. So this is the difference between a car and a building. You know, a car, yes, we like it. I like it because I'm a nostalgic man and I like old cars. But it's obviously, its aesthetics do not belong to our time, except from a position of nostalgia. But it's not the same with the building. Or not completely. Maybe some so-called details, maybe this curvature here, the corner is a little bit, but otherwise the building as it is could have been published on Arch Daily or the Zine quite easily. Now the Bellevue Theatre, we saw a restaurant, a sketch, a drawing of it from 1935, 1936, Bellevue Theatre. Now we know how theater is written in Danish, almost like in English with a T at the end. So this is an almost 90 years old theater. And look at the interior with that opening roof. Well, I almost felt like saying, wow. You know, it looks, you know, very forward looking still. 90 years ago, before the Second World War, and it's still, you know, impressive. In this black and white picture, I don't know, but this is the chair he designed for this restaurant, which is part of the theater. A very fine chair. Arne Jacobsen, like other great designers from Denmark, knew what he was doing. After all, the king of chairs, Hans Wegner, was also a Danish, and I love Hans Wegner. Once in New York, I even found the Throne to the Gerbiger chair by Hans Wegner. Yes, it's true. Made of teak, extremely light. You could have lifted with, you know, 1 or 2 fingers. This chair also shows knowledge and inspiration. You know, it's functional, but it's also it has a gentleness of design. He was an excellent designer. And Denmark, as I said, has a great tradition in this field. In general, the Scandinavians are very good at furniture design, and maybe the Danes are the best. This is a petrol station, gas station. We saw it already in a sketch from 1936. Now you could say, you know, why did he complicate himself with this canopy here, you know, supported by one single central pole and being so thin and so on. This is, you know, acrobatics, architectural acrobatics. But yes, it might be, but what would architecture be without these so-called acrobatics? It wouldn't be architecture, you know, it wouldn't. That's why I think the architect, as Doshi said, quoting from Le Corbusier, has to try to be at least sometimes an acrobat, to do things nobody asks him to do, just for the pleasure of risking, or for the pleasure of, yes, of you know, forcing the unknown. Okay, maybe one would do it differently than he did it, but it still stands out, you know. And otherwise, the building, prismatic as it is, it's fine in its own terms. Arne Jacobsen, Denmark, Porsche, probably. I don't know a lot about cars, but that looks kind of like a Porsche. It's even written on it. Okay, to match the building, whitish. And the bikes, of course, the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful bikes that the Danes love, and that perhaps we should love too, all of us. That is, if we still care about the oxygen we are, inviting into our lungs. The Stellinghouse, Copenhagen, 1934-1937. It's, I think, an office building. Smaller work, I mean, for an office building. Again, you have to consider it was built 80 something years ago, before the Second World War. Now a town hall. This is, I love this work by him from 1938. It's so, apparently I mean, you could pass by it and not notice its sophistication. And, it's truly a fine example of a reticent architecture. And there are examples of reticent architectures in Scandinavia in general. It's nothing spectacular. I'm surprised that Bjarke Ingels is Danish, because he represents a different kind of Dane. Usually the Danes are very reticent, subdued, and maybe this is a new kind of Dane that Bjarke Ingels represents. But the Aarhus City Hall, let's see, just a second. Somehow similar. He designed a few city halls. This is in Aarhus from 1939 to 1942 with Erik Möller. Again, it's an architecture which is almost telling us, I'm not architecture. But this is like The Man Without Qualities of Robert Musil. You discover qualities in what appears not to have them. I know what I'm saying now seems to be in contradiction with what I always say, but it's not. I admire reticence. And it requires an heroic stance to arrive at, measured architecture. We are going to see also some very interesting things within reticent building that I mean, even here, you look at this staircase, it's elegant, it's refined, it's very well done. Is it art? I would say it is. And look at the interior. It's art. It's art. It's modern art. It's functionalist art, but it's art. I mean, just look at these columns, or one column that is divided into two that supports the stair here. It's very elegant. If it would have been like this one, it would have been heavy. Well, he was aware of it and he divided it in two. Even small things like this, the handle of a door, and it's a special small event in the physiology of the door, so to speak, in the anatomy of the door. This what is happening here. It's important. So this is a city hall, the city hall in Aarhus. I don't know if I pronounce very well the name of this city. It is said that the Danes are the happiest people on earth, or they were considered as such, 1 year ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, but they are there at the top. And why is it that it is so? And I read that they are, rather happy because they don't have great expectations. And this results in the reticence that I mentioned. He designed here everything, the chairs, the tables. It's the gathering room, the, you know, the, yes, of the city hall where they take decisions. The lamps also, he designed some excellent, excellent lamps. Arne Jacobsen, he designed everything. So what we are looking at here is an architecture that might have pleased probably Descartes too. You know, with, you know, straight lines, rectangularity, but if you look at the reality of the building, there are subtle things there that need to be noticed and that show grace. So you can do a good design. Indeed, I am continuously attacking the T-square and the rectangle, but you can do good architecture with them too. On the other hand, this was done 90 years ago or so. I like these terraced houses too. You have to know that before I left the country, I published in Secolul 20 an article about Denmark, about the architecture of Denmark. And anyway, it's a longer story, but I am a little bit emotional because at that time when I wrote, I knew nothing about Danish architecture. I never went to Denmark. I never went outside of the country, but I studied through books and I tried to write as well as I was able to, and it was published in a beautiful volume, which had you know, the work of John Utzon, another great Dane in architecture, the opera in Sydney, a dramatic picture of it, which was also on the, I have to tell you, Secolul 20 is still and was and is, and I think will continue to be a guiding mark in the Romanian culture. I have felt honored to have the chance to publish there. So these are the houses that Arne Jacobsen built. They're simple. They are, you know, there is a rhythmicity. There is nothing here obscure or anything, but there is vigor. There is, you know, order, but there is also some variety or movement because of, you know, the way he planned this succession of buildings one near the other. You'll see them in the plan. So, you know, they are not perpendicular on the street. This creates a dynamic architecture, even if it's you know, based on repetition. And again, you know, the reverence for brick. The brick is at home in the Scandinavian countries. Not only there, of course, but much can be done with brick. I mean, you know, just to build a wall of the brick and not hide it, and it has already a richness. These are the plans, you know, functional apartments with a, you know, an L-shaped large living room, and at on the second floor, the bedrooms, and so on. And like in Frank Lloyd Wright and other important architects, fire is at the center, you know, the hearth. Now, this town hall, in my opinion, is the best that he designed. 1952, 1956, after the war. Let me see. I hope I have. No, I'm confused. I didn't look at this presentation. There is another one, but we'll arrive at it. He designed several town halls. This is good too. And again, in a very reticent way, he asserts the nobility of architecture. Look at the details of this stair. You know, they are almost sublime in their simplicity. This is a very refined design, as you can see. The exterior, what can we say? It's as simple as it could be. But, you know, it's not a city hall that tries to crush you with its representational power, you know, to intimidate you. Quite the opposite. It's a building that states its function in, you know, unassuming terms. If there was no clock there, you might not have known this is a city hall. Another housing complex, 1949, 1953. You can see he could be, he could have been, and he was even capable of vigor. You know, this is a vigorous, you know, building, and you see, in a way, elements of what later constitute some of the architecture of Bjarke Ingels, for example. You know, this zigzagging geometrical you know, zigzagging, and, you know, arithmicity, there's a regularity in Bjarke Ingels is able also to bring in the unexpectedness of the spiral, or, you know, certain fluid surfaces. At that time, Arne Jacobsen didn't need them, but today maybe we do. This might explain in part the tremendous success of Big. Big, but this is also a sign of the time we live in, that we are now, just like OMA is the office of metropolitan architecture, and Big, yes, is the, you know, the office of Bjarke Ingels. So, but Bjarke Ingels group, but I'm sure he found pleasure in the so-called coincidence that Bjarke Ingels group becomes big. It's almost an exasperated quest for you know, for standing out through dimensional, you know, metropolitan and bigness. This was not typical of the Scandinavian countries and mentalities. In fact, the great Danish philosopher Kierkegaard actually complained that it's very difficult to stand out in the Danish society because everything is so homogeneous that, you know, if one stands out, is immediately, you know, brought down. But it seems things changed, I guess. Anyway, this building by Arne Jacobsen, again, if it was built today, would be considered, I would say, highly. Now, another town hall, I hope this one is the one that I like the most. Let's see, the Glostrup Town Hall, 1958. I begin with the handle of a door. No, it's not this one. He designed too many. But here again, you know, in simple things, we see the relevance of quality, essentially. You know, even that number two, the way it is placed, you know, the way the spacing between the bricks is handled. Um, you know, small things like this, but they are part of the integrity of what architecture is or is supposed to be. I'm not so sure about the meaning of this sculpture here, um, which is rather, you know, but yes, it's life. It's you know, it's tension, it's conflict, it's eros, it's war, it's you name it, love and war. Another handle by Arne Jacobsen, a school in Copenhagen, 1957. This is a fine school with courtyards. You see, each classroom has its own courtyard, and I would say this matters. You know, it gives a sense of intimacy, of individuality. When the weather is nice, you know, you can walk out of the classroom and you know, enjoy even classes outdoors. It's a nice school, and done with simple means, real. And the light comes properly inside the classroom. How many schools look like this one? Not too many, unfortunately. But here it is a dialogue between the outside and the inside. And the tallest thing, if I am to call it thing, is the tree. It's not the building, it's the tree. Is it a modern school? Yes, it is. In terms of architecture, definitely so. Now, the hotel, we saw a sketch, I mean, some kind of a rendering of it. It was built in Copenhagen, 1958, 1960. Here it is. It's still a presence in the capital of Denmark. He designed the chairs as well. He had work to do, of course. It's elegant. It is an elegant building in its kind of architecture. Contemplate the precision of the corner, you know, and you know, it's quite elegant. Now, I use the word reticent a few times, and yes, Danish design is reticent, but these, chairs, if I am to call them chairs, they have a certain flamboyance even about it. They are almost baroque. This one too. Strangely, my experience of Copenhagen was not, I mean, I know they are considered to be the happiest people on earth, or some of the happiest on earth. But when I was there for a few days, I had the feeling that they were actually very nervous. But maybe I projected my own nervousness into them. A chocolate factory. Ah, chocolate. Uh, does it look like a chocolate factory? I don't know. Probably not, but I would visit a chocolate factory anytime. It must be a very pleasant visit to visit a chocolate factory. I would also work gladly in a chocolate factory. The National Bank of Denmark, wow, 1965, 1970, and the bank it is. It's the National Bank of Denmark. Quite impressive, as banks should be, since money rules. It seems in rather dramatic ways. But regardless of the function of the building, look at the subtle design in this tall atrium. And again, the staircase. He designed staircases magnificently. With a few changes, this space could have belonged to a church or a cathedral. Maybe I'm getting carried away here, but there is something about the way the light enters the building, and the staircase itself is like going towards something that is that belongs to the beyond of life. It's grayish everything, with the exception of colors. That I saw other pictures. Sorry. It's quite a big building, as you can see. What can we do? It's a national bank, nothing else. Now a sports hall from 1965. It does look like a sports hall, it's true, in the sketches, and it does so also in reality, the built work. Well, by today's standards, some of his works might appear to be a little bit dated because of the, being happy without a lot of expressivity or expression. Now he also built in Oxford, in the United Kingdom, for St. Catherine's College, because he was a famous architect. Maybe not too many people talk about Dan Jacobsen now, but mid-century, in the 20th century, he was a force in architecture and design. So we are in the United Kingdom at Oxford with this building by Arne Jacobsen. Now this is an interesting work in Germany, the Mainz City Hall, 1966, 1973. It's again, even if he is considered an important representative of the international style and functionalist architecture, we see here a certain level of monumentality, of sculpturalness even. And, the building is very well crafted in terms of expression. Both outside and inside. And interesting how he handled the dialogue or the conflict, the dialectics, the opaque wall and the glass parts of the building. Rather interesting and unusual what he did here, but shows again a very fine sense of design. Because this part is almost embroidered in its appearance. It's a city hall, but it could have been an embassy or anything actually. I'm not so sure about these lamps here, but I don't know if he designed them. But the building is good. Here it seems to be a little bit busy because the so-called embroidery of this part of the building is challenged by the variety of, it's a little bit too much impressionism here. Somehow in the other pictures, this was not so, so obvious. What I'm trying to say is that, in my opinion, since he used this fragmentation here, the fragmentation of the opaque parts of the building should not have been almost at the same size, and so there seems to be a little bit of irritation, visual irritation. At least for me, it is, even in the black and white pictures. But it's still an interesting building. Now another town hall, this time in Germany. You see, he worked a lot with horizontal buildings. This one, horizontal, but not everything is horizontal. So he becomes more flamboyantly oriented, just like some pieces of furniture by Arne Jacobsen. I mean, in the previous picture, this seems to be very tall, but when we look here, it's not like that. I'm actually confused. Is it the same part? Now I see there are several parts that employ the same kind of exalted architecture. Now, another school from 1970, 1971, a bigger school. Well, this is what happens when education becomes an industry. What we look at here, it's not a chocolate factory, it's not a factory, it's a school. But its scale is, it's done exquisitively, it's true in terms of design, but still a very large building. Hamburg, 1970, buildings become bigger and bigger. Capitalism progresses. Europe distances itself from the Second World War, and that's what we look at here. Larger and larger buildings. Still gray, but still elegant. The Royal Danish Embassy in London from 1976, 1977. Here it is. Well, embassies are embassies, but fortunately there are those colorful flags there. Otherwise the building would have been, yes, elegant, yes, austere, but not too much joy perhaps here. An architectonic mechanism. Well, at night, there seems to be a different story. Radically different. Now, I will end this presentation on Arne Jacobsen with some examples of his furniture and product design. The ant chair from 1952. The ant chair is a classic of modern chair design. It was designed in 1952 by Arne Jacobsen for use in the canteen of the Danish pharmaceutical firm Novo Nordisk. The ant was named for its approximate similarity to the outline of an ant with its head raised. Here it is, and it's a famous chair. a stool from 1954. The Tong chair, 1955. A little funny, the names of his chairs. And chair, Tong chair. I'm not sure I would have called them in the same way, but the Series 7 chairs. Architects love to design chairs, and I think chairs love to be designed by architects. The Swan chair, 1958. The egg. Well, we saw him, in one of these eggs. Again, I'm not sure I would have called it the same way, but this is irrelevant. It's probably comfortable and protective. Chairs by Arne Jacobsen. We see the ant on the left. I don't know how the others are called. He was not afraid to use color either when he felt like it. And here he is, the designer and the architect with the egg, larger egg chair. He also tried something like this. Great craftsmen they have in Denmark. Now, mid-century Danish design is splendid, and maybe one day I'll make a presentation just about that. I did make one about Hans Wegner, the king of chairs, but they had many, many important designers. And I have a great tradition of, especially that period, mid-century Danish design. Lamps. Okay, that was it with Arne Jacobsen. Let's wish him happy birthday. And now we go to another architect. I have a much shorter presentation on Jan Wils, a Dutch architect this time. Let's read a little bit about him. So Jan Wils, 1891-1972. He died on February 11th in 1972. Was a Dutch architect. He was born in Alkmaar and died in Voorburg. Wils was one of the founding members of the Steel movement, which also included Piet Mondrian, Theo van Doesburg, and Gerrit Rietveld. Among other works, Wils designed the Olympic Stadium for the 1928 Summer Olympics in Amsterdam. His design was also entered in the Olympic art competition and won the gold medal. Interesting that design for the building entered the competition that took place at the same time with the Olympics. He also designed the Papenborghof housing complex, which is a Dutch national heritage site. And now I know what this word means, because the other day I didn't, and now this is what it means. It's a Dutch. It's protected by Denmark, the Dutch national heritage site. This was the man. He didn't build so much, but he was important. Some drawings, a few, one or two, well, not so just drawings, the things showing the influence of the steel, the stronger personalities there were Theo van Doesburg and Piet Mondrian and Gerrit Rietveld. But he had his role. Again, the architect loves to design chairs, and chairs love to be designed by architects. Now we look at a building which does not exist any longer. From we built it in 1918, 1919, was demolished in 1960. Frank Lloyd Wright had a great impact on Dutch architecture, and here we see perhaps a little bit of that. Why was this demolished? I do not know. Now, Dutch architect Jan Wils designed this 1931 Citroën showroom and headquarters in Amsterdam shortly after completing work, I guess, on the 1928 Amsterdam Olympics. It's now a business sports mobility powerhouse, according to Google Translate, which may make more sense in Dutch, but it looks as though the exterior is largely unchanged. This is the building. It's a showroom, and we are going to see some pictures with delicious old cars in it, like here. Again and again, the discrepancy, between architecture and car design. The car design of that time, I mean, the building was built, at the time when these cars were built. But while the building looks contemporary, the cars do not. We might like them, of course, and I like them, but they do not belong to our time. The cars of our time look very different. But the building could have been built today just fine. Jan Wils. Now, this housing complex is important in the Netherlands. Let's read a little bit about it. It is a housing complex in The Hague that was designed by Jan Wils, built between 1919 and 1921, so it's 100 years old. The project was Wils' breakthrough as an architect. Today, this Papa Verhoef is a monument in the sense that it is one of the top 100 Dutch heritage sites, and they have many important buildings. The Netherlands. The complex was restored in 1958, 1971, 1989, and 2006. Well, it seems they do take care of the heritage sites. So the complex includes 128 middle-class homes built in horseshoe fashion around the sunken garden. Besides the communal garden in the middle, each home has its own yard with enclosing wooden fence and cement flower pots in matching architectural style. And here it is. The buildings are a little bit dated. I mean, something about them that they seem to be a little bit dated, but I'm sure they are quite comfortable, and indeed they seem to be restored, properly taken care of. The fences as well, not just the buildings. And again, these buildings are even a little more than 100 years old. Here is the site plan. I once tried something something similar myself, where I connected the buildings at the corner through balconies. Here he does a little more than that. It's a more I don't know exactly how, he solves problems of light here, even of ventilation, because these are rather narrow, these spaces. But since they are not tall buildings, I guess it works. Jan Wils, a former member of the steel movement. The steel movement, which is so famous, but Theo van Doesburg was not an architect. Piet Mondrian was a painter, and Gerrit Rietveld was a cabinet maker. So that it might be that actually Jan Wils was the only architect, but he himself, I don't know if he received training as such as it is today in architecture. And we are talking about a major art and architecture movement, now the steel. And they did build buildings, including Theo van Doesburg. Piet Mondrian didn't build, but he painted cathedrals when he was younger, and he has some very moving paintings before he arrived at his well-known verticals and horizontals. He always painted cathedrals and trees, churches, village churches, or whatever, cathedrals and trees. The Olympic Stadium by Jan Wils from 1928, it's almost 100 years old, and it's still functioning, and it's a good building, and it looks human towards the outside. Maybe because of the brick, it's an unusual site for a stadium to look like this. I imagine he designed also this vertical element, which shows a certain complexity in its simplicity. The Olympic Stadium during the Olympic Games of 1928, a view from the air. Who would have thought in 1928 that 15 years later, Europe would be ravished by the Second World War? Ravished. I mean, we are talking about the Netherlands. The Netherlands suffered immensely because of the Second World War. Rotterdam was almost leveled, dramatically destroyed. Why is it that humans cannot abstain from wars? Why? When it's known that in a war, actually, you don't have winners and losers. Everybody loses, everybody. And yet we cannot abstain. It's incredible. It's some kind of a demon of self-destruction within us. We build things and then we start wars. Jan Wils, the Olympic Stadium in Amsterdam from 1928. Now, I found this on the Dutch website. I don't know how to read, but the first word can be understood in Hague, which is the capital of the Netherlands. Here is the building, still standing. Jan Wils, who died on the 11th of February. Another protected work, but he worked here with another architect whose name I hesitate to pronounce. You see there, Wils, Jan Wils, you see his name on the right. It's interesting, this interesting villa or house. I like it. You know, we know the Schroeder house by Rietveld, but this one I didn't know of until I discovered it actually today. But I think it's a good work. And Jan Wils was part of the small team that created it. I see it almost as some kind of a building that negotiated between the Still and the School of Amsterdam, although the School of Amsterdam is a little bit more romantic and lyrical. But here you see, because of the material, essentially, the brick, it's something about it that makes me think also a little about the School of Amsterdam. And it is, well, it's in Hague, but 50 years of the Great Wall of China. I found this, you know, it's not the Great Wall of China, but it's a large building that he built together with that other person in 1965, a housing complex which probably is known or called the Great Wall of China. It was built in 1965, and this is an image from the interior, Jan Wils. We are going to see, maybe I should show first, here it is. And you see the text there in Dutch. This is the great Chinese wall, so to speak, in the Netherlands. You know, built in 1965 by Jan Wils and his colleague. But we look at, you know, it's the staircase probably of a building without elitist ambitions. But you see that it's a finely designed staircase. Different from the staircases that we saw with Arne Jacobsen, but still a fine design. And it's important, this space, because it's the, you know, if it has dignity and beauty, when you use the stair, you know, you are not depressed. Unfortunately, many cases in our country, at least, of staircases are just depressive because, you know, nobody pays attention to them, as if they are just utilitarian devices. They are not. I mean, they do have a utilitarian function, but there is more to a staircase than that. Anyway, I think this is the last work I show in this introduction, because it's no more than that. But he didn't build so much, Jan Wils, the truth of the matter. Okay, and now, if you allow me, I will show you the sketch of a third presentation, which I would have liked to discuss about with you today. It's just I'll just show you a few images of something that interests me. Is Descartes and architecture, and Eisenstein and architecture. And the reason I would have liked to talk about this is because Descartes, René Descartes, the great French philosopher, and Sergei Eisenstein, the great Russian film director, died both on February 11th, but of course years apart. You know, Descartes, you know, generated the word Cartesian. And there is a lot of Cartesian architecture in the world. I'm going to show here, though, a project for a Cartesian, so-called Cartesian house, which is interesting, I think, but it was not built. Is this house, the XYZ house by Axis Mundi? It's a project. the XYZ house by Axis Mundi. And here it is. It's a very abstract proposal. Does it connect with Descartes? I would say it would. It does. Will it be built? I don't know. I imagine it will not be built. But for projections of the mind of the architect, for speculative contemplation, and for discussions, perhaps it's worth looking at it. It can be built, of course, but I don't know if it will be built. I don't even know if the landscape is truly like this. So, by the way of the day, when René Descartes died, I thought of showing this project. I could have shown many others, of course, because there is plenty of Cartesian architecture. But what that Cartesian architecture neglects is that actually Descartes was searching for God. And I don't think too many people, when they use straight lines and the three coordinates X, Y, Z, they think of God. I don't think so. As for Le Corbusier, who dedicated a poem to the right angle, Le Poème de l'angle droit, he was rather an alchemist there. And he was. It's an esoteric work. But in both cases, Descartes and Le Corbusier, with his Le Poème de l'angle droit, there are insinuations towards something which is beyond the measurable, that is, towards the spiritual. And yes, Descartes, when he was saying, I think, therefore I am, he was thinking in a way that was forcing, moving beyond the measurable. This is an interesting proposal for a house. Again, this is just a little sketch. You'll see a few more images. Who is this rebellious man, or at least with a rebellious coiffure? This is the great, great, great Russian film director, Sergei Eisenstein. And he was truly great. And he looks great. I mean, if someone looks like a genius, that's him. And he was. Some scenes he worked with montage. And it's interesting to search actually on the web, about his work, because they do have relevance for architecture. And Bernard Tschumi, both Bernard Tschumi and Rem Koolhaas were aware of this. And, at least Bernard Tschumi made explicit references to the art of montage in the films, in the activity of Sergei Eisenstein. Because you could actually do an architecture which assembles through the technique, the method of montage, various fragments in an unexpected way, just as the film director does, as we can see in these images. In fact, yesterday I sent an email to Bernard Tschumi. I told him today is the day when both Descartes and Eisenstein died, and I would have liked to make a presentation on them, but I'm not prepared, and I'm still not prepared. But the subject interests me. In what way Descartes, with the rigor of his three coordinates and rectangularity, could meet or meets Sergei Eisenstein, and in what way rectangularity could be dynamic through the art of montage, as suggested to us by Sergei Eisenstein. In other words, in what way or how the static elements of rectangularity could become dynamic. But I think it's possible. Here is again Sergei Eisenstein He was truly a very interesting man. And as I said, he studied architecture and he became a director, a film director. And maybe if he didn't die at 50, he would have created many more very important films. So if you want to remember the face of a genius, I think you will not do wrongly if you remember this face. Sergei Eisenstein. This is what he says, and I think this is relevant to architecture as well. The profession of film director, can and should be such a high and precious one that no man aspiring to it can disregard any knowledge that will make him a better film director or human being. And if we replace here the word director with the word architect, let's see what we get. The profession of an architect can and should be such a high and precious one that no man aspiring to it can disregard any knowledge that will make him a better architect or human being. Thank you.